Hello, it's Gareth. Welcome along to Somewhere on Earth. It's Tuesday, the 30th of September, 2025, and you are incredibly welcome. All right, so Ania is here. Hello, Ania. How's things? What do you know?
Well, I know that we're doing shutdowns and social media today.
Oh, yeah, lots going on in the show, so stand by for that. And I can give you a little bit of pre-tech, if you like, as well. You won't hear this anywhere else. Very interesting. I was at the Architectural Biennale in Venice, as you do, Anya.
Yes, I mean, Digital Planet used to go there quite a lot, didn't they?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we've done the old Biennale a few times. Right, so anyway, I just saw this really interesting tech thing that I've done a bit of a search on. I don't think it's been reported anywhere, really. I never knew this story. But here we go. Strap in. I'll do it nice and briefly. Let's go to Catalonia. That's where this is based. Catalonia. And you've got the Ebro Delta, which is a big rice cultivation part of Catalonia. Has been for years and years and years. So, mid-20th century, around 1949, you have the Mutual Rice Society, and they're incredibly worried about all the hail that was coming down, incredibly heavy hail that they still get. Climate change has actually made it worse. But anyway, ruining or damaging at least, the rice crop. So, they came up with this bright idea to build 38 towers, and they're called Colteres. I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly. Apologies if I haven't, if my Catalan is not right. But these 38 towers in which they housed rockets, and then specially trained farmers would fire these rockets with silver iodide up to the clouds. And the whole idea was, if you like, to seed the clouds to try and ease or prevent the hail. Never knew this was going on, never knew that had been a thing. But the contemporary angle to that is that these towers, they still stand. I should say that the rocket against the lightning thing, that's now all gone. So these towers haven't been doing very much. Some of them have been repurposed. But now they're repurposing even further and using these towers for community observation and data in a lovely 21st century, almost citizen science-y kind of data ownership project to do its bit to try and understand the local environment, climate change mitigation, and maybe do something a bit less dramatic but still really cool to try and protect the crops from hail and climate. There you go.
Well, indeed, that's quite interesting. And let me interject quickly, because I remember a story on Science in Action on BBC World Service that I commissioned a reporter to do from Moscow, and they were using a similar technology, this aiming silver into clouds and cloud seeding, and this was for very rich people who don't want rain on their weddings and the authorities when there were big parades. So this kind of technique has been used before for many reasons.
Oh, there we are. Stuff I never knew. Every day's a school day here on Somewhere on Earth. All right, here we go. Also coming up. This week, a crisis in moderation in social media across many languages. Hate speech doesn't stay up very long on English language social media sites, or at least it shouldn't, but that's different for many other languages, especially on smaller platforms where there's little or even no moderation. We'll talk to the person who's been studying all this. And Sudan has blocked voice and video calls on WhatsApp, worsening things for citizens already ravaged by years of conflict. And also this action by the authorities in Sudan is hampering the work of humanitarian organisations. Anya's been investigating that for us. It's all right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. Social media platforms that millions of people around the world use have no moderation, allowing hate speech and other harms to proliferate unchecked. Now, that's the worrying conclusion from research just published into the disparities in moderation between social media platforms, mainly the smaller platforms, across different languages. The English language is well served, possibly not surprisingly, but some languages are not moderated at all. Well, I've been hearing more from DPhil student Manuel Tonneau at the Oxford Internet Institute at the University of Oxford. He's the lead author of this new research, and he's been telling me why he and his colleagues set out to do this work.
The thing is, for a long time, we very much didn't have a lot of information on this. So the only thing we had were concerns based on leaked documents from whistleblower. And so that's obviously from a research academic perspective a bit problematic, because you're basically just basing this on a few concerns, but you don't really have numbers or to actually base this on. And so a big motivation of my work was to try to quantify this a bit more and to understand a bit more how these inequalities look like. So we've had an opportunity through new regulation, partly through the European Union Digital Services Act, that recently started forcing platforms to reveal numbers on the number of moderators that they have per language, for example, which is something that we didn't have in the past, and so we could not basically make these comparisons across languages before. And so thanks to these new data sets, we all of a sudden have a bit of an overview of what is going on, at least for European official languages, because that's what the DSA covers. So there's still a lot of room we're not covering, but at least it's much better than before, because we start having some numbers on this.
Yeah. So when you break it down into different languages, I'm going to throw it out there and say that English is probably quite well covered.
Yes.
Other languages, not so much.
Yes.
The case. So tell me about the languages that are not as well covered or covered at all.
So again, my analysis was based on European data. So this is mostly covering European official languages. There is a bit of information on other languages, but what we're seeing basically, if you look at the number of moderators or like whether platforms have at least one moderators or do not, if you look at these language blind spots where there is no moderators at all, it's usually smaller platforms, so not the big ones like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, but more Twitter X or Snapchat or LinkedIn that have several language blind spots in terms of European languages. And if you look at the languages specifically, there are basically three groups. The first one would be Eastern European languages. Think of Czech, think of Baltic languages like Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, as well as Slovak, Slovenian. All of these languages have at least one language blind spot, so at least one platform out of the three I named, X, Snapchat, or LinkedIn, where no human moderators exist. So there's no human out there to verify what AI may flag in terms of content moderation and correct potential mistakes. The other two groups are Northern European languages, so think Danish, Swedish, Finnish, that are three languages with several language blind spots, which was for me a bit of a surprise, to be honest, because you would think that platforms would partly allocate based on financial reasons, and so potentially for markets where ad revenue is lower, put less resources, but they have decent ad revenue in these Scandinavian countries as well. So that was a bit of a surprise. And finally, Southern Europe, think for example Greek, where we found several platforms not having any human moderators, basically. So yeah.
Yeah. And, so some might say, well, if we're talking about the smaller platforms and the less spoken languages, in terms of harms, well, let's not worry too much. But on the other hand, we're still talking about millions of people, aren't
Exactly.
we? And there must be potential for harm if you're on these platforms and there isn't any moderation.
Exactly. Yeah, so in terms of numbers, we also push this a bit further. And so for these different languages that have no human moderators, we then looked at the number of users that were speaking these languages on these platforms. And for X, this is about 15 million European users that speak daily, like active users that are on these platforms and post daily in these languages, but then you have nobody to verify what's going on. For LinkedIn, it's about 6-7 million European users, and Snapchat is also around 6 million users. So we're really talking about millions of users that post in languages on these platforms where there's no human moderators that can make sure that there's no harmful content out of all of this.
Is there any evidence that you've seen, maybe this isn't part of your research, but is there any harm? Have you noticed any or been able to identify any?
Yeah, so I have other ongoing research looking at questions of hate speech, for example, and looking also at the prevalence of this phenomenon across languages. And you do see that this exists across languages. This is not something that only exists in English or other well-resourced languages like French or Spanish, but this very much exists in other European languages, in other international languages like Arabic, and so on. And so these harms definitely exist. And the thing also to mention is that this content moderation approach is very much AI plus human. So you usually have these AI systems that are there to, across the flow of social media content, try to flag potentially problematic content, but we have evidence that they make a lot of mistakes. And so the humans on the end of that pipeline are very much crucial to correct these mistakes, both in terms of preserving freedom of speech, because you have people making statements that are not particularly harmful, but that will be picked up by the AI as harmful. And so you want to have humans that correct that to make sure that people do not get silenced for content that is not harmful. And on the other hand, you also have a lot of harmful content that just doesn't get picked up by these systems. And so it's very like having humans in this pipeline, in this human in the loop setting, is very much crucial to correct AI mistakes and make sure that these online spaces as safe as possible.
So, I mean, I guess it's pretty obvious from what you've been telling me, but what are you calling for on the back of this research then?
So I think the first thing that we would like to know a bit better is just to understand these allocation choices, right? Because in this paper, generally, we find both that a lot of languages do not have any moderators, and for the ones that do, we also find big differences. So for example, we find that Arabic has 3 or 4% of the resources that English receives on X in terms of the number of human moderators. And so that's, you're talking about huge differences. The first step is trying to understand why these differences exist. So we list in the paper, like we speculate a little bit on what these could be. So as you were saying, it may be that harmful content may be more prevalent than in one language than another. It could be that, again, maybe some financial interests where ad revenue may be higher in some places than others and so on. Like there may be a lot of different reasons for that, but a first step would be to tell the public what these are and have a debate about that. And the next step is obviously for very much underserved languages to look at how more investment could be made to make sure that these populations also can have a safe existence online and not being targeted without any type of retaliation. And I suppose the last request is also a request to more information is to go beyond European, like the European setting, right? Like we have this data because of European regulation, and so we have information on European languages, but there's a lot of languages for which we do not have any information. So think about South Asian languages where social media is very prevalent. We do not have any information on how much resources are allocated for these regions. So first of all, better understanding why these choices are made, and then second, giving us more information on like global moderation and not just on European moderation.
There you go. That is Emmanuel Tonneau telling us all about his research there into the moderation or lack of it across different languages on especially some of the smaller social media platforms. And this in many ways was your baby, wasn't it, Anya? You found this story, fixed up the interview with Manuel. What was your take?
Well, I mean, I was looking at it and I was thinking, no, this can't be right. These are European languages. I mean, I understand that we've covered Kiswahili, we've done Arabic, because obviously there's such a variation in the Arabic language, and we've done proper bona fide studies on that. We've reported on that. This can't be right. And the more I read about it, the more it alarmed me. And also, I was really quite surprised to see LinkedIn mentioned on there. And there will be more about that in the Pod Extra, the subscription part of the show, which you can catch by going to pod.fan somewhere on Earth, Googling that, and you can listen to that for a very small fee. But I was really, really shocked at some of the languages and the fact that some of these so-called very professional platforms have the same issue.
Yeah, all right, Anya. Me too, as well. Really glad that we got to speak to Manuel. All right, let's have a quick listener message. Do you want to do this one, Anya, or shall I?
I'll tell you because he emailed me.
Go on, you
So,
do it.
listener James appreciated a combination of topics last week. I just finished your latest episode and was really struck by how you tackled both digital ceasefires and groundbreaking AI with DeepSeek. It's not easy to find a tech podcast that pairs deep social impact with technical innovation, so thank you for that sharp balance.
Gosh, thanks right back at you, James. And James totally gets it. That is exactly what we're here to do. You know, we are here to bring you those unloved, often unreported, but still very important tech stories from around the world. And there are tons of tech podcasts out there. I listen to a lot of them, and they're all brilliant, and they do tech really well. But just nobody seems to be filling this space. And maybe I shouldn't shout too loudly about that because we don't want any competition in this space. But James, thank you, and thanks for getting it. Okay, well, next time you have a voice or video call on WhatsApp, spare a thought for people in Sudan, for whom those services have been blocked. Officials in the country have cooked up security as some kind of defence for the ban, that's what they say. But that's no comfort for millions already hit by civil war. And the ban is also disrupting aid workers and journalists. Now, this comes after a year of repeated internet shutdowns in the country. And digital rights groups are accusing the authorities of violating international law and deepening the humanitarian crisis. The Keep It On coalition, made up of more than 300 organisations worldwide, is now urging Sudan's authorities to reverse the ban and to stop weaponising connectivity. So, Anya, again, one of your babies here, you've been looking into this. You've done quite a lot of work on this, haven't you? So can we just start with the basics? Treat me like a beginner here. What exactly did happen on the 25th of July? And how does that fit into Sudan's wider history of communication shutdowns?
So, Sudan's Telecommunications and Post-Regulatory Authority enforced a nationwide suspension of WhatsApp voice and video calling functions. Text and group messages remain, but real-time calls are blocked indefinitely. Authorities justified this, citing security threats and the need to protect Sudan's supreme interests. So, pretty vague, if you ask me. But this, Gareth, is part of a broader pattern. Throughout the conflict, authorities have used shutdowns, throttling, and selective blocking to control information. Instead of protecting people, these moves deepen isolation, prevent humanitarian coordination, and silence citizens.
Yeah, and I want to think about those citizens as well, Anya, because what would you say then is the human impact of losing all these calls? And bearing in mind, these are encrypted calls as well. That's a big reason why a lot of people use WhatsApp. So what's the human cost here?
Absolutely. Well, it is enormous. For families that are scattered by war, WhatsApp calls are often the only affordable way to hear a loved one's voice. Aid organisations rely on them for rapid coordination. Activists and journalists use them to securely report abuses. Without WhatsApp calling, NGOs face delays in delivering aid. Witnesses struggle to safely share evidence. Survivors of gender-based violence lose confidential helplines. Ordinary citizens are forced onto less secure, more surveillable channels. So the ban, it's not just an inconvenience, it strips people of tools that keep them safe and connected.
Yeah, I suppose it is worth just exploring the other side, though, because governments often argue that they need these measures in times of conflict. And they might say, for instance, that you could have militia or terrorists or other the bad actors, acting against the interests of the state, who are hiding within these encrypted platforms to, plan attacks or assaults on the government, on armed forces or whatever. So could Sudan have a legitimate security case here?
Well, international law does allow temporary restrictions, but they must be necessary, proportionate and time-bound. July the 25th is quite a long time ago. Here, None of those conditions are met. The ban is sweeping, indefinite, based on vague claims of security. It affects civilians far more than soldiers. Rights group, especially the Keep It On coalition, say this isn't about security at all, it's about control. It fits a pattern we've seen worldwide. When governments are under pressure, they silence digital communication to stifle reporting and dissent.
Okay, so no, Sudan doesn't really have a case. I think it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
short answer to that. But it's really interesting just to kind of go through the different sides. What then is being demanded now, Ania?
The Keep It On coalition is calling for 4 key things. Number 1, lift the WhatsApp ban immediately, guarantee no further arbitrary shutdowns. Number 2, protect telecom infrastructure, stop targeting towers and cables and allow repair crews to work. 3, respect international humanitarian and human rights law. So ensure civilians can communicate freely. 4, let international actors in. UN agencies to tech companies to help restore connectivity and hold authorities accountable. The coalition is framing this not just as a tech issue, but as a humanitarian one. In war, the right to communicate can be as critical as food or medicine.
Yeah, but what about the practicalities here? Because, I mean, even if, best case scenario, possibly the ban were lifted tomorrow, there surely would still be all kinds of barriers that are blocking communication in Sudan. It's not all just going to get solved overnight, is it?
No, I mean, there are several issues here. Physical damage, fibre lines, towers, switching stations have been destroyed or severely damaged. Security risk, crews often can't enter and safely repair in contested areas. Power struggles, both sides have blocked or sabotaged networks. Financial strain, sanctions and conflict make it hard to source equipment. So even if the regulator says go, actual restoration will take resources, negotiation, international support and a lot of time.
Right. So you have pressure from the likes of the Keep It On coalition. So, the activists are all over this, or, digital rights campaigners, I think is better to refer to them as. But what about, the big cheeses in the room here, the tech companies themselves, WhatsApp, Meta, maybe even the satellite providers, comms providers. Can they step in?
They do have some leverage, that's for sure. Meta can push for transparency, publish reports, explore low bandwidth or offline modes. Telecoms can resist overbroad orders or maintain redundancy. Satellite mesh solutions could bypass damaged infrastructure, though cost and politics are obstacles. The Keep It On coalition wants these companies to act more boldly, not just comply with state directives, but defend user rights. In Sudan, that could mean providing alternative secure channels or supporting activists with tools that resist censorship.
All right. Now, just before we wrap this one up, though, Ania, we've got a bit of form here. We've been surveying this space for some time in Sudan. Back in the day, you and I worked. That's how we know each other, really. We worked on the good old Digital Planet programme for many years over at the BBC World Service. And a little while back, I remember we reported on Sudan's first mobile money transfer app, didn't we? There's memories coming back there. So it makes me think about the role that these fintech, financial technologies might play in a crisis like this.
Yeah, that's really important. Apps like Gurush, highlighted in Digital Planet in 2019, allow people to send and receive money digitally. Now, people in these camps, for instance, don't have ready money, so the only way they can pay for things is using fintech. During the war, they've become lifelines, helping displaced family receive remittances from abroad or pay for essentials when banks are closed. Cash is obviously unsafe to carry. But here's the catch. These apps rely on internet access. If you cut off networks or restrict platforms like WhatsApp, you're also disrupting the ability to access financial tools. For people already struggling to survive, it's another blow. So digital money is part of resilience, but only if connectivity is protected. Without it, even the most innovative apps can't function.
Yeah, it's so fundamental. So finally then, bigger picture stuff here, Ania. What does Sudan's experience teach us?
That communication is not optional in conflict, it's survival. Sudan shows us that shutdowns are a weapon of war. Connectivity must be treated as humanitarian infrastructure. Tech companies can't remain neutral when their platforms become lifelines. And international actors must embed digital rights into humanitarian response, the same way we do with water, food and shelter. The global message from Sudan is simple: switch it back on and keep it on.
Absolutely. Ania, thank you. Well, that'll do us for today. Quick reminder, of course, we are with the Evergreen Podcast Network. We love them because they have really interesting podcasts that you kind of wouldn't necessarily have heard of other than through Evergreen. So check them out. Easy to find them online. Don't just listen to us. Mainly listen to us, please. But there are lots of other good titles up there with Evergreen. And thank you very much to Roost and soon Sasians for their sponsorship of this podcast. Highly valuable. And let's talk about the people here as well. The people in the room. Production manager Liz Tuohy, keeping us all on track. The editor and our CEO is Ania Lichtarowicz, doing a lot of reporting today as well. And I'm Gareth. See you soon. Bye-bye.